Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is that you are watching this recording. Welcome to our nutrition Q&A. I think everybody here knows who I am. I just wanted to kind of start this off by reiterating my intention for creating this little workshop. I'm just finding that there's a lot of people who need extra support when it comes to nutrition. It's a really confusing world out there when it comes to figuring out what to eat. There's no one size fits all diet. So it literally does take some experimentation to figure out what is going to work best for you as an individual. I also just want to preface this whole thing by saying that I am not a nutritionist. I am not a licensed nutritionist. So whenever I encounter a person who is wanting something that is more focused in terms of meal plans or really getting clear on what their macronutrient ratio should be, I do my best to refer out to a licensed nutritionist so that they can get the proper support. Because as a health coach, I mainly help people implement behavior changes. So it's a little bit different. So today I'm going to be giving a lot of general information about nutrition. It is going to come through the paleo diet lens, just because my background is as an ADAPT certified functional health coach. And so a lot of the nutrition that I've studied and things that I've helped people implement have been using a paleo diet template. So it's not something that's set in stone that is like, only eat these foods, never eat these foods. It's just a template from which we work to cut out the most inflammatory foods in the diet and to start including nutrient-dense anti-inflammatory foods. So if anyone feels that they want a referral to a licensed nutritionist, I have a few different people that I can refer you out to who are absolutely wonderful, who can help with that. Okay, so just to kind of give a little overview of what today is going to be, I'm going to start off by talking about hydration, because that's a really important piece to our health puzzle. It's often something I hear people say, oh, I know I should drink more water, but I just don't. And there's definitely a big difference between knowing something and doing something. So we're going to go over hydration first. And then I'm going to just give a brief overview of macronutrients, so protein, carbohydrates, fats, and I do have some handouts and I'll be screen sharing, so you will receive attachments of those PDFs along with this recording. So we're going to go over macros, and then of course there's going to be time at the end for any questions. So yes, just a general rule of thumb. Whatever your weight is, divide by 2, and that's how many ounces a day you want to aim for to drink of water. But if you look at the bottom of this slide, you'll see the average adult in the US drinks an average of 39 ounces of water a day. So that's appropriate for a 78-pound person, but I think everyone who's watching this recording probably weighs more than 78 pounds. So I mean, maybe just, ask yourself, like, if you had to guess, what is the average amount of water that you drink per day? And does that feel like it's enough for you? So the values at the top of this slide are based off of a person who weighs 175 pounds roughly. And so for liters, I think 1 liter is somewhere around 33 ounces. And that half your body weight in ounces a day, that guideline is appropriate if you are mostly sedentary. So if you're moving around a lot, if you're sweating, or if you live in a place that has a warmer climate, and that you're going to be losing water that way. If you're pregnant or breastfeeding, your need for fluid is actually going to increase. So point being, most people are living in some sort of state of chronic dehydration. And especially in relating this back to exercise and our physical goals, we need water to lubricate our joints. The discs between the vertebra and our spines are mostly made up of water. So if we become even mildly dehydrated, we can often feel that as inflammation in our joints. It can manifest as pain. And so this is why I wanted to start this whole conversation really talking about the importance of hydration, because even a little bit of dehydration can really affect your physical well-being, as well as your goals. Just to kind of go over what some of the signs of dehydration are: headache, skin stands up on the back of the hand after a gentle pinch. So if you squeeze the skin between your fingers and it doesn't pop back to your hand right away, that's a sign of dehydration. If you're testing this on an older person, that it may not be that they're dehydrated. This is not a great measure. So you may have to flip their hand over and pinch the skin or depress the skin on the pad of the thumb here. And it should turn white right when you press it, but the color should return after a few seconds. If the depression of the thumb pad stays down for several seconds, that's a sign in an older person that they may be dehydrated. If you're not urinating very often, or your urine is dark yellow, if your skin is dry, feeling dizzy or faint, rapid heartbeat. This is another one that I hear sometimes from people, and they get concerned that they have a heart problem. And then when we explore, how's your hydration? It's like, oh, I maybe drink like 1 or 2 glasses of water a day. So that can definitely be a sign of dehydration. Rapid breathing, sunken eyes, lack of energy, confusion, irritability. So just some things to look out for if you suspect that you may not be drinking enough water. We're just going to do a little overview of macronutrient ratios, and what you need in terms of protein, carbs, and fat really depends on your individual goals, as well as symptoms or anything that you may have going on medically. And I just want to preface this by saying that this chart is through a particular lens. It's through the lens of the Adapt Health Coaching Program, which is through a paleo lens. And none of these values are set in stone. Okay, so you kind of want to use this as maybe just a beginner's guide towards how many carbohydrates should I be eating, how much protein, how much fat. But really, really, I like to encourage people to experiment and figure out just what works best for you, because everyone's different and your body is going to change from over time, but also from day to day, depending on your needs. So your needs might be different on a day that you're doing strength training versus a day when you might be sitting in front of your computer and only get like a 10-minute walk in. So we're going to start with carbohydrates, because this is the macronutrient category that I think is confusing, most confusing for a lot of people. Carbohydrates have been vilified recently. I know a lot of people who are afraid to go near them. And I know that it's also a common problem that people tend to overeat carbohydrates, and this can cause a lot of issues. So if we focus on where do we want our carbs to be first, it's a lot easier to then plug in protein and fat. So this is where we're going to start. And if you look at this chart, you'll notice that a very low carb diet is most appropriate for someone with a neurological issue like epilepsy or Alzheimer's disease, people with severe blood sugar problems. So this is kind of more looking at a ketogenic diet. And that would mean that less than 10% of your total calories are coming from carbohydrate. So if we're looking at a 2,600 calorie a day diet for men, that would be less than 65 grams of carbs a day. And on a 2,000 calorie a day diet for women, that would be less than 50 grams of carbs a day. I'll be honest, I don't know a lot of people who thrive in this category. I know people who've used it for short term and it has been beneficial, but unless you have a severe neurological issue, it's challenging to stay on. It's really difficult to be social and to be staying on a ketogenic diet. And if you're a woman in your reproductive years, it can be damaging for your hormones to stay on a very low carb diet. So next is low carb. So very low carb to low carb. This is typically a good place to be if you're interested in weight loss. If you've got blood sugar imbalances and you tend to go up and down quite a bit. For people who have mood disturbances like mood swings, And for people who have digestive problems, because carbs tend to be difficult or problematic, especially depending on the type of carb on the digestive system. And a lot of carbohydrates can ferment and cause gas and bloating and abdominal distension, and you can get small intestine bacterial overgrowth and things like that. Um, and so this would be about 10 to 15% of your daily calories would come from carbs. For men, that's about 65 to 100 grams, and for women, that's about 50 to 75 grams. And I'm going to show you also a carbohydrate chart so that you have some idea of like, well, how much would a sweet potato be? Or like, what does a banana look like? Okay, so next we have moderate carbs, 15 to 30% of total calories coming from carbohydrate. 100 to 200 grams for men, 75 to 150 for women. This is a good place to be if you are generally healthy, if you're looking to maintain the weight that you're currently at, if you have adrenal fatigue, which is also called HPA axis dysregulation. You may have been hearing it called that more in the recent past because there is no such thing really as adrenal fatigue, but that's just kind of a more popular term that more people are familiar with. Hypothyroidism, so carbohydrates actually necessary in order to support the thyroid. And for people with familial hypercholesterolemia, that's a mouthful. So these people are basically, they have the genetics to be what are called hyper responders to dietary fat, particularly saturated fat. So in a person's diet, there's typically an inverse relationship between carbohydrates and fat. So if you're eating a low carb diet, you're getting more calories from fat. If you're eating a low fat diet, you're going to get more calories from carbs. So people who have this particular issue, it does raise blood cholesterol and will increase their blood pressure and their LDL particles and things like that to eat more saturated fat. It's a small percentage of people, but it does happen. And so for those people, a high fat, low carb diet would not be the best thing. And then the last category is high carb, greater than 30% of your total calories coming from carbs, more than 200 grams for men, more than 150 for women. And this is great for athletes, highly active people, anyone who's looking to put on weight or put on muscle, people with a fast metabolism, and people who are pregnant or breastfeeding. Okay, so that is carb. Want to make sure I'm not taking up too much time with this. Okay, on to protein. Okay, so this is another category where I typically find people are under eating protein. And this is extremely important because if you are looking to gain muscle, and this doesn't necessarily mean that you're looking to put on size to your body, but we're not talking about the scale, because the scale can be not the best way to measure, what is going on with your body composition, because muscle weighs more than fat. Most people know that. But if you're looking to build strength, after all, we're all here doing strength training, you're going to need protein to really fuel that muscle growth. And with muscle growth comes fat burning, because your muscle is your fat burning machinery, and it takes a lot of energy for your body to maintain higher levels of muscle composition. So for protein, if you're generally healthy or if you're pregnant, 10 to 20% of total calories, if you're counting that, would come from protein. So for men, that's somewhere between 65 and 130 grams. For women, somewhere between 50 and 100 grams. And if you are interested in weight loss, if you have blood sugar regulation problems, or if you want to put on muscle, you're going to want to bump that protein up even higher, 20 to 35% of your total calories, which is anywhere between 130 to 230 grams for men and 100 to 176 grams of protein for women. So now that we've covered the carbs and the protein, what's left is going to come from fat. And I do have a healthy fats cheat sheet to just give you a great idea of what are some good oils to cook with, what are some of the fats that you would want to be consuming to make up the rest of your diet. All right, I'm going to stop for a minute and ask Uma, do you have any questions, any comments, or anything to share before I move on to the cheat sheets?
Thanks, Steph. I was wondering with trying to like I definitely am focusing on weight loss personally. And would you suggest like basically weighing everything that I'm eating and then tracking that? Is that how you would like kind of implement making sure that you're eating the right amount of carbs? I guess it would just be, but then each thing has different carbs in it, right? So like, I guess like for instance, I had a lot of plantains today,
Mhm.
and I'm pretty sure I went over my carb, but like I know that the carb content of plantain is different from fruit, which is different from sweet potato. So it's like, how do you measure your carbs
Yeah,
specifically?
that's a fantastic question. And I would say you hit the nail on the head when you said like keeping track and tracking. So I always tell people, no matter what it is you're looking to improve, whether it's your finances or your fitness or your diet, keeping track is the number one thing you can do to just really build that awareness of, well, what does my daily diet look like? And so if you can keep track for a few days to about a week, and really just write down as much as you can. I wouldn't say you have to weigh it. For some people, that's helpful. If you have a very specific goal, if you're a boxer and you're trying to make weight for a fight or something like that, and it's very important for you to know exactly what you're having, it's fine if you want to use a food scale and weigh your food and things like that. It can lead to a bit of obsessiveness. And for some people, that can become its own form of stress and can be unhealthy. So it sort of depends on, how much do you need to track in order to gain the awareness necessary to start to tweak that macronutrient. So yeah, I will show the carbohydrate cheat sheet next, which will probably be helpful. But I would say you could even use like your fist as like a measuring tool, or you could guess, or you could just say like, oh, it was about a half a cup of cooked plantain at breakfast. And then you would just want to track that for lunch and dinner as well.
So a fist is a cup, or is it a?
Well, I don't know if it's about a cup. I think it depends on the size of your fist. You could take a measuring cup and stick your fist in it. um, But if you tend to eat like the same types of carbs, it might be worth measuring it once. And then you'll know, like, oh, what is one plantain? Oh, maybe one plantain is a cup and a half, because maybe you buy those big ones. But if you're eating like a banana, that might be just a lot smaller and a lot different size. So it can help to, I wouldn't say weighing it in terms of like this many ounces, but just kind of having a general, how much is this? Is it 1 cup? Is it 2 cups? Is it 3 cups? That can be helpful, even if you're just approximating to get a ballpark figure.
Okay, thank you. It's helpful.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so I will go back to sharing, and we're going to go to carbohydrates, because again, that is the macronutrient ratio that is the most confusing, and people aren't sure what to do. Should I hate carbs? Should I never go near them ever again? But carbohydrates are important for energy production, unless you are on a ketogenic diet or unless you do well on a low carbohydrate diet. So this cheat sheet is, it's a paleo carbohydrate cheat sheet. So you're not going to see pasta, you're not going to see bread, you're not going to see cookies or bagels or croissants or non-paleo foods. So really what we have here is fruit, and then we have on the second page our starchy tubers and root vegetables. So if we look at the fruit category, we've got one medium banana is 27 grams of carbohydrate. So if you remember back to the macronutrient cheat sheet, somebody on a low carb diet, let's say a woman on a low carb diet who's trying to stay in that 50 to 75 grams of carbs a day, the banana could be half of your carbs for the entire day if you were to have that, and if you're trying to stay low carb. So that's probably one of the most sugary vegetables. I'm a little bit surprised at this. I would expect to see watermelon higher on that list, because that watermelon also has a lot of sugar. But we do want to take into account the fiber and the other nutrients that comes along with eating fruit. It's not just empty, unless you're juicing. If you're having fruit juice, then you are just getting the sugar from the fruit. You're not getting the fiber or the whole matrix of the food, which is going to slow digestion down and allow it to enter your bloodstream at a slower rate. So we do want to keep that in mind. But this is just a little guide to show you a roughly carbohydrate content of fruits. And then on page 2, these are the starchy plants. So we've got plantain, which Uma mentioned. And so a cup of plantain, if you were to slice it up, is equivalent to about 48 grams of carbohydrate. So if you were to eat 4 plantains in a day, now you're going to be starting to approach actually that high carbohydrate category, which is, remember, great for people who want to put on weight or gain muscle mass, people who are highly active, pregnant, or breastfeeding. So I would say on this list, you may see some foods that you're like, what? Like, I didn't know what breadfruit was. I was like, that's interesting. Yucca, I can't remember if it's taro or yucca, but one of those is equivalent with cassava. So you may have seen cassava chips are becoming very popular. There's a brand called Siete that they sell at like Whole Foods, and they make tortilla chips and things like that out of almond flour and also cassava flour. Tapioca. And then here at the top, you've got your white potato. So that could be a russet, it could be a yellow potato, it could be a red potato. I believe all of those fall into the white potato category. And one large one is 64 grams of carbohydrate. So I'm not saying that's either good or bad, because I really don't like to use those words to talk about food. But in terms of what is your individual health goal, having this information will help you to better make the decision about what day to have it. Like, maybe it's best to have those on the days that you're doing your strength training and you need some more of that glucose or that glycogen to fuel your workout, either before or to put it back in after your workout. Whereas on a day that you're more sedentary, you may choose to eat less fruit if weight loss is your goal, or less starchy plants and tubers. All right, I'll pause for a moment in case there's any questions about carbs.
No questions at the moment. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Uma. All right, so we'll move on to protein. Good old protein. Like I said, a lot of people not eating enough protein. This one I think is a little harder for people to get. So our paleo protein cheat sheet has half of a duck as the first thing. They're like, I'm hungry. I think I'll just eat half a duck today. And so it has all different kinds of seafood, all different kinds of meat. And then towards the bottom, we start getting into some dairy and eggs. So I'm going to start closer to the top because you'll see that the protein grams are higher at the top. And there were guidelines in that previous macronutrient cheat sheet. But another thing you can do is take your body weight in pounds and multiply by 0.8 grams. And that should give you kind of a daily total of protein grams to aim for. If you're looking to gain weight, add muscle, putting on muscle, you're going to want to bump that up to more like 1 gram per pound of body weight, or maybe even a little bit more. So for a 150-pound person, they would aim to eat 150 grams of protein a day. And it's not that easy to do, to be honest. So this is where you see people like bodybuilders will use protein powder, because there's just no way that a 300-pound man is going to be able to eat like 400 grams of protein in the form of meat a day. If you look at this, let's look at just chicken, for example, like chicken breast, light meat. 3 ounces, we can say that that's about the size of the palm of your hand, or like a deck of cards, roughly. That's like 3 to 4 ounces. That has 28 grams of protein. So just kind of like think about like, okay, 150, 175 pound person, if they were going to eat close to 1 gram per pound of body weight a day, that's a lot of chicken, right? So that's like 5, I don't know, I'm not really doing the math great, 5 or 6 deck of card sizes. And it changes based on the type of protein. So we get kind of down into the fish a little bit here, turkey. Typically red meat tends to be a little bit higher, I think, in protein than white meats. And then if we look at the bottom, and I really like to highlight this fact. This is like most people's breakfast who tell me that they eat like a high protein breakfast. They're like, I had 2 eggs this morning and 2 strips of bacon. And it's like, okay, so if you were eating a really, really large egg, and if you were not cooking it all the way through, because cooking it actually does reduce the amount of protein a little bit, that still would only be about 15 grams of protein there. And what I tell people who want to lose weight or are focusing on building muscle, burning fat, is you want to aim to have at least 25 grams of protein at each meal. So somewhere between 25 and 40 grams of protein. And again, you can get more specific on that if you want to, do the math and really start to tune in to exactly how much you're eating. But as Uma and I talked about earlier, using the palm of your hand is a good measure for most people in terms of what is a serving of beef, pork, chicken, fish, things like that. And then there is protein in dairy products. For people who tolerate dairy well, I would say you're better off having full fat dairy than low fat dairy, or non-fat even, and that there are a lot of nutrients in things like whole milk yogurt, whole milk cheeses, if tolerated well. And there is some protein in there, but there's also carbohydrate and fat. So it can be quite a calorie dense food. Again, not bad or good, just really depends on what your goals are there. Uma, I'm going to go to the next slide. If you have a question, feel free to unmute. Otherwise, I will just move on to our last slide, which is going to be good fats, bad fats. Okay. And I'm assuming you can see that. Yeah, Uma?
I was just say yes, we can see it.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so this is not a comprehensive list of foods that contain fat, which would include things like avocado and macadamia nuts and other kinds of nuts and cheeses and heavy cream and things like that. But this is more of a guide for oils and fats and which ones are best to cook with, especially if you're using high heat as opposed to just drizzling oil on a salad. But this is in 3 categories of what to eat liberally, what to eat in moderation, and which oils to avoid. So I'm going to start just with the avoid category. Here you have all of your industrial seed oils: soybean, peanut, corn, safflower, wheat germ, canola. In Canada, that's called rapeseed, and sunflower, cottonseed, grapeseed, rice bran oil. This is going to be all of the highly inflammatory. They're high in omega-6, which is a pro-inflammatory fatty acid. And they're going to either have no omega-3 or very, very low omega-3. So it does promote inflammation in the body. They often go rancid at high heat. And I think that probably the most dangerous part about these oils is that this is what restaurants use to cook your food. This is also what they use to make cheap salad dressing. So even if you were to go to a restaurant and you're like, I think I'm going to order a nice big salad with protein on it because that's going to be the healthier option, beware of what their salad dressing is made out of. Extra virgin olive oil is very expensive, and restaurants even, I think it was out of the book Deep Nutrition, written by Dr. Kate Shanahan. She had interviewed the head chef at French Laundry, which, if anyone here knows what that is, it's an extremely expensive restaurant, either up in Napa or somewhere in Sonoma County. And people can spend, $1,000 per person there. And they cut their salad dressing with canola oil. So they use extra virgin olive oil, but they use half canola oil. And the reason for that was it would increase the price of the salad by like $2 if they were to use extra virgin olive oil. And this is at one of the finest, most expensive restaurants around. So it makes you really think about when you go out to a sandwich place or, you know, just any place that you can kind of think of around here, these are the oils that they're mostly using. So that's why it's really a good idea to avoid anything that's deep fried. I will sometimes have people bring their own salad dressing if they're open to it, like in a little Tupperware, something that won't leak when you go to a restaurant, just so you don't, all of your efforts aren't just completely undone in eating a giant salad that's just covered in soybean oil. So those are the ones to avoid. The ones to eat in moderation, we have sesame, walnut, pecan, almond, flaxseed, avocado oil, nuts and seeds, and nut butters. And the reason for that is also because they are higher in omega-6, that pro-inflammatory fatty acid. And we are already bombarded with omega-6 in our diet. So we don't want to keep filling that cup up. And then lastly, we have the eat liberally category. As we kind of go back for a second to that familial hypercholesterolemia, this is where we want to be careful that if somebody does not have the ability to digest and turn saturated fats into the building blocks for their hormones and use it in a healthy way, then they would want to be careful with things like duck fat, beef and lamb tallow, lard. So they may want to go more towards those mono unsaturated fats like olive oil here. Coconut oil is mostly a saturated fat. Palm oil is terrible for the environment, so I'll just say I'm not a fan of that. But as far as for your health, it's not a bad oil to have. We have ghee, which is clarified butter, olive oil, chicken fat. I did not know that was called schmaltz, but I like it. I'm going to start calling it that. Eggs, mainly the egg yolk, and macadamia oil. So this is just a nice little chart you could print out. You could put it on your fridge just as a little bit of a reminder. And then lastly, and maybe the most important part here for those of you who do cook at home is to know what is the smoke point of these fats. Because if the fat that you're cooking with exceeds its smoke point, it literally goes rancid and then it is no longer heart healthy. It's actually damaging for you. It's like just consuming free radicals. So here at the top, which I've actually never found this. I use avocado oil for cooking, but I don't know where to get extra virgin avocado oil. But it's good to know that its smoke point is nearly 500 degrees. So avocado oil is typically a good fat for frying, or if you're going to do high heat cooking, ghee is the next best at 485. I don't recommend cooking with extra virgin olive oil because it does break down and damage the anti-inflammatory properties of it. So if you're going to cook with olive oil, look for extra light. I know they sell it at Costco. You can get it there because I've had a hard time finding that at health food stores too. It's like they only sell extra virgin olive oil. And then save your EVOO for putting on your vegetables and on your salads or on anything else that you're eating where you're not going to heat that oil up. Palm oil, coconut oil, expeller pressed, macadamia, beef tallow, duck fat, lard. And then butter, you'll notice if you've cooked with butter, it burns very quickly because the smoke point is somewhere between 250 to 300 degrees. Extra virgin olive oil will also start smoking pretty quickly, which is why you really don't want to use it to cook. And then even extra virgin coconut oil doesn't have as high of a smoke point as the expeller pressed refined coconut oil. So at home, I keep two different ones. I keep my raw extra virgin coconut oil for making desserts, like my coconut haystacks, where I just melt the oil and press it into a dessert. And then when I'm cooking with coconut oil, like if I'm making a fish dish, I will use the refined expeller pressed coconut oil, which has a much higher smoke point. Okay, that's enough out of me. So that is just a little overview of macronutrients and how you can start paying attention a little bit more if that is something that you think would be helpful to supporting you with your physical goals, with your health goals. And as we had discussed earlier, the tracking is really important if you want to start to make some positive changes in your diet. Something I've noticed is it's just really hard to keep an awareness of everything we're putting in our mouths, as well as what we're not putting in our mouths. You know, a lot of us know, like, I should probably eat more vegetables, but when you see it on paper, like, I haven't eaten anything green in 3 days, it really just helps bring this new awareness that can really shape your choices moving forward in what you want to be spending your time on preparing or seeking out when you're going to the grocery store. So if you do decide to start tracking your food for a few days or maybe even a week, consider writing down not just how much water you're drinking and what you're eating and how much, but also track your symptoms. You know, how much energy do you have? How was your sleep the night before? How do you feel a couple hours after eating a certain food or a particular meal? What are your bowel movements like? All of these things can give us really, really good information about whether or not the diet that we're eating is working well for us. And if you are feeling challenged because you know, knowing something different than doing something. So if you are feeling challenged you think that you have the information that you need, and it's just a challenge to actually put it into practice. There's some kind of obstacle, something is getting in the way. You're not really sure. You're not sure if you want to put in the effort or if that's the way that you want to go, then consider health coaching, because that's exactly what I do in my health coaching sessions, is to help people figure out what it is they really want and then have actionable steps to get to that. Because change is hard and it's a process and it doesn't happen overnight. So just for anyone who's interested, if you haven't done a health coaching session with me, I do offer a complimentary 30-minute introductory session so that you can experience coaching in this way to see if it's something that gels with you. And I'm also offering a 20% discount on all of my one-on-one services, including the health coaching to series participants. So if that's something you're interested in, reach out and let's book an appointment and you can experience health coaching. Okay, I managed to do it, and I left time at the end in case there was any more questions.
That's great. Thank you. And I can testify that Steph's health coaching is fantastic. I've had a couple sessions myself. That's wonderful. Very, very helpful.
Thank you, Uma.
Mm-hmm. So I think we were talking in class last time about, it was like someone else had asked a question, but this question of like belly fat and specifically, I guess men or women, but I don't know if you have any specific suggestions dietarily on what creates belly fat or what can like help to reduce it.
Yes, absolutely. I can't tell you how many times I get that question. And I'm really glad you asked it here, because a lot of times our brain will just go to the food, right? Like, oh, I must be eating something that's causing my body to accumulate belly fat. And what can I change in my diet? And there is a big component of that, you know, sometimes looking at where might we be out of balance with our macronutrients. A lot of times, if I had to just generalize, I would say not enough protein, not enough healthy fats, and far too many carbohydrates. That's typically the way most people will go if we are not making a concerted effort to eat more protein and to really keep our carbohydrates on the lower side. But a really important piece that I want to mention here is stress. So I don't know, have you heard of the cortisol roll? Is that something you've ever heard of, Uma?
I heard cortisol, but I don't know the second word. Roll, did you say?
Roll like a bread roll, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I've never heard of that.
Yeah, so cortisol is one of our primary stress hormones. And when we are experiencing chronic high stress, or even just chronic stress, it doesn't have to be like our survival is threatened every second of the day. It could be just this low level stress. And we have so many different forms of stress, right? Like there's environmental stress. There's a lot of toxins, right? Like the water, the air, our environment's polluted, our soil's depleted. So even if you're doing everything you can to keep your stress low, we're still being bombarded. Our personal care products, you know, the things we put on our skin, shampoo, soap, all of those things can contribute to our stress. But if you are experiencing this just kind of chronic state of stress, your body will accumulate body fat around your midsection. So that's why they call it a cortisol roll. And you can make tweaks with your diet, but a lot of times people who are experiencing this type of stress will not experience a huge change in the shape of their body or where they're losing the weight from until they address the stress. So that's why especially in health coaching, I help a lot of people to identify the sources of stress that are within their control and then figure out ways to manage that stress. We can't do it all, we're going to be bombarded from all different directions. But a lot of times we tend to get ourselves stuck in that state of chronic stress, and it's difficult to relax, and we don't know how to relax our muscles, and we stop breathing fully, right? Like we stop using our diaphragm, we start kind of chest breathing, staying sedentary. So yeah, I would say one, look at diet and really start to match yourself up to the macronutrients. Just start to write things down, have a look at your food log, see what trends you notice. I'm also happy to just have a look at that, for anyone who wants to keep a food log. If you want to just meet for 10 or 15 minutes to kind of go over it and get an idea, I'm just happy to do that, on the house, just to help you get a little idea of like where's the biggest challenge? Is it going to be addressing stress management, or are there further tweaks that you could make with your nutrition?
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
For that offer with the diet.
Absolutely. Sure. Yeah, I know it can be really daunting. Like I said, there's a lot of different schools of thought out there. And I would just say to anyone, like, beware of any diet or like plan that is like, this is going to change your life and this is the only way and this is the right way and carbs are horrible, or like never touch fat. It's the body is so dynamic, we're always changing, and our needs are very different from person to person. I know people who thrive off of low carb or even ketogenic diets, and I know people who do their best on a higher carbohydrate, lower fat diet. So it's really it really depends on the individual, and it takes some trial and error to figure out what works best for each person.
Nice. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome, Uma. So,
I actually need to head out in a moment, but I really appreciate this time together. I'm going to go back and look at the recording too, even though I was here. It was really helpful.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for your questions. If anyone else has questions, feel free to send them over. I'm happy to get on an email with you. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you, you too.
Welcome.
Take care.
All right, bye.